Man sees child on street at night. His face is covered in blood. Children are the greatest gift of life, with their boundless energy, infectious joy, and unwavering innocence. They possess the remarkable ability to reignite the spark within many of us, who often find ourselves weary and disheartened due to the hardships we faced and the injustices prevalent in the world. A child represents a pure soul brimming with potential, eagerly embracing each day as a new adventure filled with curiosity and wonder. Everything is seen through their eyes of innocence and excitement. But what happens when it is the children who lose faith in us? How do we respond when we are the ones who have let them down? Alexander Bekasov lived an unremarkable life with very ordinary dreams and aspirations. He was a man very committed to his work and his family. He worked the night shift in an old gas station outside the city of Odessa, Ukraine. He was married and had a 10-year-old daughter, Anna, whom he hardly saw because he spent the night working, and during the day when he could be with her and his wife, he had to rest. Hearing this, you'll find it very difficult to believe that this man, one of the protagonists of the story we're going to tell you today, could be interesting or noteworthy. But don't be fooled by appearances and don't let your prejudices cloud your mind, because this humble, hardworking man, practically invisible to the rest of society, managed to do something extraordinary that would not only be worthy of mention in this story, but also in newspapers and news channels. It all started one cold and quiet winter night. It was 4 o'clock in the morning and Alexander was returning home from work in Odessa after a long day of more than 10 hours of work at the gas station. As expected, the street at that time of night was deserted. Alexander was in his car and had the heater on to keep warm. On the street, it was extremely cold, barely 2 degrees below zero, and there were violent gusts of wind that made it even more difficult to be outside. It was impossible for anyone to be walking down the street in those conditions. The darkness was almost complete, save for a couple of street lamps on both sides that illuminated the street to let you know where to go. Bekasov was distracted in his thoughts, driving very slowly even though there was no traffic, and while waiting for the traffic light to turn green, he saw something that puzzled him. Across the street, in the middle of the darkness and huddled on a bench shivering with cold, Alexander could see something truly heartbreaking that would leave him stunned. It can't be. Who could be sleeping in the street in these conditions? I think it's a child, but how can it be? He must be freezing to death, he said to himself as he got a little closer with the car. When he arrived at the height of the bench, Alexander's worst suspicions were fulfilled. It was a child with his legs against his chest and he was shivering. It was a very small child, no more than 3 years old, and he looked very bad. Alexander was horrified to see the child there and quickly set out to offer his help. However, he would later discover that the situation would turn out to be much worse than he'd ever imagined. Alexander got out of the car in a hurry and approached the boy to ask him what he was doing on the street and see how he was, but he got no answer. Getting no answer, Alexander moved closer to the boy and gently pulled away the boy's hands that were clinging to his face. The little boy was trembling, and when he opened his eyes, his look was full of fear and suffering. It was then that Bekasov realized the gravity of the situation. The boy was covered in bruises and scratches and had bloody cloth covering his forehead. Seeing this, Alexander rushed to grab his phone to call the police, but was prevented from doing so by a shaking, icy hand. "Please, no police, please," said the boy in an almost imperceptible whisper. Seeing the boy's reaction, Bekasov stopped and put the phone in his pocket, at least for the time being. At that moment, it was more important to find out who this boy was and the reasons why he was there alone, shivering with cold in the middle of the night. "Okay, we won't call anyone for now, but I need you to tell me what your name is because you're here alone. Where are your parents? Are they hurt? Did you have an accident and that's why you're here? Please, tell me anything so I can help you." The man was really worried about the boy, and although he meant well, asking him so many questions wasn't going to make the boy relax, quite the opposite. While Bekasov was looking at him, trying to decipher the origin of all his scars, the boy who was looking at him with panic in his eyes started to cry. Alexander felt terrible because he felt that he'd frightened him. He tried to relax him and invited him to get to his car to warm him up. "Don't cry, please. Forgive me. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm just trying to help, really. You're so small. You remind me of my daughter, you know? I would never let anything bad happen to her, and I want to help you too. Please, get in my car. Look, it's that one over there," he said, pointing to his car. "We'll be more comfortable there, and you won't be cold. I also have chocolate. You like chocolate?" Alexander's words seemed to relax the boy, who, although he was still crying, no longer looked at him with fear. Finally, through tears and the occasional whimper, the boy agreed and went with him. He was frozen to death, and the most important thing at that moment was for him to warm up and eat something. It was obvious that he hadn't eaten anything for several hours. Who knows if it would be longer? Once inside the car and after eating 2 chocolate bars in less than 5 minutes, the boy seemed to be much more relaxed, although he still didn't say a single word. Then, without saying anything, he lay down on the back seat of the car, adopting the same posture as Alexander had found him in, and fell asleep. Okay, get some rest. I don't know what happened to you, but we'll find out. I'll help you, I promise. And even though I know you won't like it, I have to call the cops. I know you'll hate me now, but in time you'll understand. Alexander quietly said to the boy, although he perfectly knew well the boy wasn't listening. Alexander immediately called the police and explained everything that happened. In less than 15 minutes, the police arrived on scene, waking the boy up, who was once again very scared and trying to get him to talk to find out what had happened to him. But no one got the boy to say anything more than his name, Vova. After that, the boy folded his arms and stared at a fixed point in the ground. Seeing the boy's attitude, the police decided to leave the interrogations for later and rushed him to the hospital to find out more about his health. Will you come along? Do you want to be his contact while we find out more about him? You're under no obligation to do so, but since you found him, it would be easier for us if you were the one to stay by his side. Seeing the state the child is in, it's better for him to be close to someone he already knows. You understand? Suggested one of the police officers who'd come to the scene. Alexander agreed to accompany them to the hospital and become the boy's emergency contact, despite having no idea who he was, what had happened to him, and why he was sleeping on the street on one of the coldest nights of the year. None of that mattered to him. The look of terror on that little boy's face broke his heart, and he only wanted to help him find his family and get his life back. The boy was cold and exhausted, and when the doctors removed the bloody cloth from his head, they saw a large lesion that looked like someone had tried to cut a large chunk out of his forehead. This set off all the alarm bells, and the doctors quickly informed the police so they could activate the protocol for the protection of children who have been victims of mistreatment. The doctors tried to get him to talk. They were very gentle with him, but although the boy seemed to be in better spirits and had a good appetite, he still didn't utter any other words that would help them answer the questions. During his hospital days, Vova was able to play and feed himself, so he'd probably grown up in a family, but his memory seemed to have been suppressed. Whenever the doctors and psychologists tried to make him remember something related to his family or what led him to sleep on the street that night, the boy would be completely silent and with a blank stare. Alexander visited him several times a week, and although the boy felt very comfortable with him and they began to become good friends, he never got him to tell him anything about his past. It's very likely the trauma he suffers from prevents him from remembering. The human mind is very skilled and is able to block out all the memories that make us suffer in order to allow us to move on. At his age, his brain is still developing, and depending on what he has seen or experienced, his memory will have hidden it in a very distant place in his subconscious. That's why right now he's unable to explain anything. His body's totally blocked, and he'll need a lot of time and therapy to be able to talk about it and find out the whole truth about his past. Concluded the psychologist handling Vova's case and who'd been examining him for weeks trying to find something out. After the diagnosis, the police believed it would be beneficial to share his story in the media in hopes of locating a family member who could identify him. However, this proved unsuccessful. Instead, the boy's tragic tale prompted an overwhelming response from people all over the world, resulting in substantial donations to cover his hospital bills and providing with clothing, toys, and diapers. Russian and Ukrainian TV news investigated the boy's past but found nothing. Vova was not registered as missing and was not in any database. He was a ghost, no one knew anything about him, and no one seemed to miss him. It was truly a bizarre case that had the country in suspense for months. Finally, after 4 months with the consent of the police, the hospital discharged Vova and handed him over to the authorities for adoption. The child had been on the front pages of the newspapers for weeks, and many families were interested in taking him in. Finally, after more than 2 months of interviews and bureaucratic procedures, Vova was adopted by a family. A good family with resources that would take care of the child and give him a normal life away from the media and tragedy. Therefore, after consulting with psychologists, Vova's new family decided to keep their identity a secret in order to shield him from media coverage, facilitate his recovery from the trauma he has endured, and help him adjust to his new family. To this day, the police are still investigating what happened to Vova, although it still seems impossible to find out anything about him or his former life. Meanwhile, the boy is said to be enjoying life with his new family and has never uttered a word about what happened to him. Alexander and the boy said goodbye shortly before his adoption process began and never saw each other again. We hope Vova has a happy life from now on and is enjoying life with his new family. All children deserve to grow up with love and consideration. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.